Kathleen LaValle became president and CEO of Dallas CASA, which stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates, in July 2014. Before that, she practiced law for 3 decades. Kathleen was rated as a top-tier counsel and preeminent practitioner by Chambers USA. For you non-lawyers out there, Chambers USA is based in London. It's a group of independent researchers that ranks top lawyers and law firms across the world. They conduct interviews of many top and boutique firms. Another distinction she earned was for chairing the Texas State Bar Antitrust and Business Litigation section. Today, she leads the largest CASA program in the country in terms of total children served by volunteers, number of volunteer advocates, and annual revenue. In 2019, Dallas CASA and its 1,500 volunteer advocates served more than 3,500 children in foster care. Now advocating for 98% of Dallas County children in foster care, Dallas CASA's goal is to serve every child in need. While a partner with Jackson Walker LLP, Kathleen headed the Women's Initiative and served on the firm-wide diversity committee. She currently serves as a member of the Dallas County Child Welfare Board, the Texas CASA Board of Directors, and the nonprofit CEO Council. Prior to transitioning to her nonprofit role, Kathleen served on the Dallas CASA Board of Directors for 12 years, including a term as board chair. Kathleen was recognized as an SMU Dedman School of Law Distinguished Alumni in 2018, and she was the recipient of the Dallas Regional Chamber Athena Award in 2014. That award is given to women who have, quote, achieved excellence in their professions, serve the community in a meaningful way, and help other women reach their full potential, end quotes. It is presented by Wells Fargo. Kathleen received her JD from SMU's Dedman School of Law and her BA from the University of Notre Dame. Immediately following law school, LaValle clerked for the Honorable Robert Madden Hill, U.S. District Court, North Division, Texas, and she later taught legal writing and Texas pretrial practice and Texas trial and appellate practice as an adjunct professor at SMU. Kathleen is married to Michael, a psychologist, and has 2 children, a young man and a young woman. A few of you will identify with a couple of her personal notes. In her own words, quote, I'm obsessed with my 5-year-old golden doodle, Gailey, while we await grandchildren, end quote. And for a number of years, she was consumed with her Mini Cooper, Vinnie. But it's gone the way of many family autos. Her daughter has it now. I am happy to present to you Kathleen McElroy LaValle.
Hello, I'm Kathleen LaValle, President and CEO of Dallas CASA, Court-Appointed Special Advocates. Thank you so much for allowing me to spend time with you today. You know, I have a favorite quote from Fred Rogers of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and it goes like this. When I was very young, most of my childhood heroes wore capes, flew through the air, or picked up buildings with one arm. But as I grew, my heroes changed so that now I can honestly say that anyone who does anything to help a child is a hero to me. In Dallas County alone, an average of 5 children each day enter the child welfare system because home is not a safe place. More than 4,500 Dallas County children were living in the foster care or other protective care placements last year. In the midst of what can be only described as a chaotic and uncertain time for our children, our dedicated volunteer advocates are a lifeline, offering our most at-risk children the very best chance to heal from trauma, to recover from injuries, to reach developmental milestones, to stay in school and live protected from further harm. While caseworkers, teachers, therapists, foster parents may cycle in and out of a child's life, the volunteer advocate really makes that lasting and caring connection, frequently becoming that one dependable adult who stands up for a child during a confusing and difficult time. Today, I'm sitting 2 miles away from a hospital where a 2-year-old little boy is in the NICU, having been admitted about 3 weeks ago with multiple skull fractures. He was stroking out, he has damage to his retinas, and he has bruises and burns at various stages of healing over every inch of his tiny, frail body. His CASA volunteer received special approval from the hospital to come in 2 to 3 hours a day to hold his hand and to read him stories. He's actually having surgery today to replace part of his skull that was removed when his brain was swelling. His recovery will be a long, long road, but he won't make that journey alone, even though his mother is in jail charged with multiple counts of injury to a child. Our volunteer is there and will remain with this child throughout his recovery. While children like this little boy really are extraordinarily resilient, we know what a critical, life-changing difference it makes for a CASA volunteer to be there, encouraging a child not to be defined or limited by their past or by the fact that they've been in foster care, and really modeling for that child, sometimes for the first time in their life, what a trusting, reliable, I show up when I say I will adult actually looks like and how they act. And doing that really during such a frightening time. You know, we hear stories over and over again about what separates a child who faces this kind of adversity and is able to grow up and overcome those challenges from one who succumbs to the many risks associated with growing up in foster care. And what we hear over and over again is that it's really about those connections. So the role of a CASA volunteer and our program professional staff is about supporting, making those connections with each child. It's about seeing a child not just as their set of circumstances and what their limitations are, but really what are the possibilities ahead for this child when they feel their sense of self-worth is reinforced. Trying to place ourselves in the circumstance of a child at the time of removal. You know, it often happens very late at night. A child's life basically is upended dramatically, suddenly, with little or no warning. Frequently, you know, there are a few personal belongings, articles of clothing stuffed into a black plastic trash bag. And then a child goes on and is taken to an unfamiliar place with people they don't know, uncertain how long they'll be in foster care, whether their placement will be changed. For many of our children, they end up changing school sometimes multiple times in a semester, and frequently not even within the same school district. They're left wondering, you know, will I ever return home? And, you know, how long will it be before I see my siblings? Because painfully, tragically, many of our children who are removed as a sibling group are not able to be placed together. When a child is removed from home, a court case is open, and it's initially opened to approve the removal, the emergency removal of a child from home based on confirmed allegations of abuse or serious neglect. But ultimately that court case is framed to determine if a parent's rights will be terminated. So throughout the time that case is pending, our judges, our local judges, will be asked to make so many critical decisions that will impact the life of a child. They'll be asked to determine whether the temporary placement is safe, is it protective? They'll be asked to determine whether it's safe for the child to go home. And if it's not, then what are the options, the best options for this child to grow up in a loving, protective, supportive home with that sense of permanence, which is so important to our kids. They'll also be asked, our judges will be asked, what are the services that each child needs to recover from their trauma? What are the educational services? What are the medical services? The therapeutic services that will help our child restore that sense of a childhood. They'll also be asked to make other small and major decisions. And what we hear so frequently from our judges is that they need just solid information. They need the details of what challenges each child is facing. And that's really where our volunteer advocates make such a significant difference. They gather the information, the very specific information about the circumstances of each child, and they provide our judges with fact-based, up to the moment recommendations and observations that help our judges make the very best decisions that they can. We have this image of children in the courtroom, and that's honestly not what happens in the majority of hearings. And so our judges are relying upon second-hand information as to how this child is doing, what their sense of well-being is. And what I hear so frequently from our judges is that the CASA volunteer becomes their eyes and ears. It's through the CASA volunteers' written reports and their oral testimony that our judges are able actually to see the child and to see the child's needs. And what longer term benefits are we hoping for our children that we serve? I made a reference earlier to the risks that children can succumb to when they grow up in foster care. And you know what those are, you've heard about them. The risk of dropping out of school, of intersecting with the juvenile justice system, the possibility of substance abuse, being victimized in sex trafficking, becoming pregnant as a teenager, and ultimately becoming homeless. Those are just some of the risks. Only 3% of our children growing up in foster care will get a college degree. And yet one of the most profound risks that I really focus on is the risk that the child may simply turn off their capacity to hope, for their capacity to see something in their future that is better, and that they'll stop having expectations of themselves because they're going to encounter in the foster care system so many adults who will telegraph to them that their chances are very dim, that they have low expectations for this child. And that's again where the intervention of a CASA volunteer and that personal caring connection can interrupt that cycle and tell a child that we do have expectations for your future. We want you to have hopes for something better in your future. Some of you may have heard about a lawsuit that was filed. An order came out in December 2015. It was a class action brought on behalf of children who are in long-term foster care. It was filed out in Corpus Christi in a federal court. And what the court ended up ruling was that the Texas foster care system for these children violates their constitutional rights by failing to keep the children safe from harm. The court's conclusion that the children routinely exit the system in worse condition than they were in when they entered is truly, truly heartbreaking. But one glimmer in what was a 260-page opinion, one glimmer of hope was an observation that the judge made that about the unique and the critical contributions of CASA volunteers in the lives of the children who otherwise are at risk of being lost and forgotten. Recognition of the unique benefit and impact of CASA volunteers only heightens our resolve to sustain our ability to serve each and every child in need. I wanted to share with you one of my favorite CASA stories, and it's about a volunteer whose name is Suzanne. She was assigned to a 5-year-old little boy and his younger sister, a 4-year-old, and they came into the system because their mother had a drug addiction and was not able to take care of the children, to keep them safe and to keep them healthy. They came in and they were ultimately placed with their grandmother, the maternal grandmother. And Suzanne continued regular contact with them over the 10 months that the case remained pending before it closed with legal guardianship going to the grandmother. Well, several months later, the grandmother's health failed and she was not able to care for the kids. And so they ended up coming back into the system, and this time were placed in a foster home where they had never lived and never visited. And so Suzanne went out, she agreed to be reappointed to this new case, and she went out for the first time to make a visit. And as she was walking up to the door, the little 5-year-old boy comes running out in kind of one of those Hallmark card moments and throws himself into her arms. And what he said was, "How did you find us? I didn't think anyone knew where we were." And it's just so painful to me to think about a child feeling that lost and that forgotten. The line our volunteers frequently hear from our children is, "I knew you would be there. You always are." Being that I show up when I say will adult is such a meaningful benefit to our children. When you are asked by your friends and family what they might do to make a difference and create a safety net for our most vulnerable children, we hope you will encourage them to come to one of our weekly 1-hour information sessions and learn about becoming a Dallas CASA volunteer. Our website is dallascasa.org, and you can go to the volunteer tab and you'll see a registration link for those weekly sessions. Our volunteers tell us it's a unique opportunity to serve where you truly can see how you're making a difference. Thanks to strong partners in our community, we are able to be there today for so many children. When I first became involved with Dallas CASA, it was as a board member back in 2003. And at that time, we were serving less than 20% of a really much smaller total number of children who were in the system at the time. In contrast, last year, Dallas CASA served 3,644 children with about 1,500 assigned volunteers on active cases. Looking at a snapshot as of the end of last year, on December 31st, Dallas CASA was serving more than 95% of Dallas children then living in foster care. For more than 15 consecutive months, we've remained open to all appointments from our courts, and that's 10 different courts that handle CPS cases. That's been an unbroken streak of 15 consecutive months of being able to take each and every case. Today, we are serving more children with volunteer advocates than any of the more than 900 CASA programs nationwide. We've achieved that growth through increased brand awareness and a tremendous swell in volunteer response from the community. Honestly, in most major urban areas, the sheer size of the need diminishes the drive. We are so fortunate in our community that size has actually inspired us. It's inspired individuals like one of your members, Susan Fleming, who's also a Dallas CASA volunteer, that the enormity of the need has really inspired our community to step up and has really driven a desire to meet the entire need. I hope as part of a community that has stepped up and responded to the call to be a voice for vulnerable children, that you feel an immense and profound sense of pride. I wanted to talk with you briefly about some of the current and future trends we're seeing in child welfare. It has been, as I said, I've been involved since about 2003. I moved into this position in July of 2014. over all of those years, I have been just surprised at the wide pendulum, how wide the swings of the pendulum are in the child welfare system. Completely unrelated to COVID-19 and predating the pandemic, we had seen a downward trend in the removal of children in Dallas County and frankly throughout Texas without any corresponding decrease in allegations. What we were seeing is that a much lower percentage of children who were confirmed as victims were actually being removed from home. And I mean, honestly, removing a child from home is so traumatic that you would never want to remove a child if it wasn't necessary for their safety. But we're clearly in a situation where a standard that applied, 2 years ago is different than the standard being applied today, which gives me an unsteady sense in terms of just consistency across time and across our systems to give you a sense of that wide swing of the pendulum I mentioned. Removals dropped by about 27% in the state's fiscal year 2019 compared to the prior year. In that prior year, fiscal year 2018, removals actually increased 31%. We're now down about 50% below what removals were in just 2 years ago. So a very, very dramatic shift. We study it, we ask questions. It's not entirely clear what policies and practices are causing that shift. We continue, and this is what I would consider to be on the opposite end, a positive trend. We continue to see a high percentage of Dallas County children who are removed being able to be placed in what we call kinship placements. A kinship placement would be either a relative placement or a close friend of the family. And I think it's just intuitive, but I'll state the obvious, what a benefit that is to a child if that household is protective. If the household is protective, what we're able to do then is maintain that connection a child feels to his or her family and to their culture. And we just know that that is beneficial to each and every child. We continue to see a problem in the system with what we call disproportionality in child welfare. What does that mean? Well, the percentage of children we serve who are African American is about twice the percentage of the child population in Dallas County that is African American. So African American children are just way overrepresented in the system. We hear lots of possible theories and explanations for that. We know that about the same percentage of confirmed victims who are white are removed as African American. So we think that the disparity must come earlier. It must be in the percentage of allegations that are received, what we call intakes, that where African American children are the identified victims. We try to do a deeper dive into that issue. It has been a stubborn one of longstanding. I wish I could say that we've made greater progress, but it has been very difficult, honestly, to gain access to the granularity of data we would need to better understand the challenge. One positive development that I've seen more recently is a much more intense dedication of resources to a plan for permanency for a child earlier in a child welfare case. And that is just so critical. Once a child has been in the system for a number of years, they could technically be eligible for adoption, but honestly, their chances of being adopted are diminished. And so if we can get in there early and try to identify, more, not just who would make an appropriate temporary placement, but are there more distant relatives perhaps that could become the legal guardians or adopt a child? There's so many benefits to that early intervention before a child in essence becomes more institutionalized into the foster care system, and what's where we really begin to see the signs of trauma. We used to call it acting out. We're a lot smarter now. We know what we're seeing is a manifestation of trauma and injury to a child. If we can intervene before they're set on a course of being over medicated, going into residential treatment centers, we just expect just such more positive outcomes for our children in their adult years. I wanted to end by just talking about the times we're in. These are incredibly challenging times for everyone, nonprofits included. It costs roughly $2,000 for Dallas CASA to serve a child for a year. We're able to keep the cost low because through our volunteers, we're a highly leveraged model of service. For each program staff supervisor I hire, every position we create, we're able to have that position when they're fully ramped up. They'll be able to manage about 25 volunteer advocates, offering them support and coaching and guidance. And then that group of volunteers collectively will allow us to serve an additional 65 to 75 children in a year. And so that's how we grow, that's how we expand. And now that we have achieved that scale, where essentially we're meeting nearly 100% of the need, we are even more determined to sustain that program capacity. As an agency that generates more than 30% of its annual budget from events, obviously meeting our budget in 2020 will not be possible. Nearly all of our major fundraisers have been canceled, including our annual golf tournament that accounts for about 20% of our annual revenue, and our 40th anniversary Champion of Children dinner in the fall. But the good news is we are still hoping to have our Pray to Playhouses event, which hopefully some of you are familiar with. It's held every summer. We actually are celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. It's held out at North Park Center, which is an incredible gallery for these adorable creative playhouses that architects, builders, and amateurs design and build. And then those playhouses are raffled off. It's very likely that we will be more virtual with our event this year that starts July 10th. But it's just so important that we not skip it altogether, because there's no event really and no activity that we engage in the course of the year that brings more awareness of our mission and helps recruit new volunteers than Pray to Playhouses. So we will go forward, even if it means transitioning the event to something a little different than you're used to, a lot more texting and online raffle ticket purchases. But we're looking forward to that opportunity. We still have applicants come through to become volunteers who say they first heard about us when their grandparents took them to North Park to see the Parade of Playhouses in the summer. With what we expect to be a surge in removals once social distancing eases further, we'll need events like Parade of Playhouses to help recruit the more than 400 new volunteers we expect to need this year. For the first time in our history, we're offering those 1-hour information sessions I mentioned earlier. We're offering those virtually using Zoom. The information session is that first step to learn whether or not the role of a volunteer supervisor is a good fit. We answer all of the questions about what are the time commitments, how do you handle kind of the emotional side, which we always tell people. We are forward looking with the children we serve. It's actually much more difficult to feel that outrage and anger we each do when we hear about some tragic injury to a child. It's more difficult to stay on the sidelines than it is to do something to positively impact that child's future. Many are surprised to hear in these volunteer sessions that over 80% of our volunteers are full-time employees. Many more are part-time employed. And we have as many volunteers who are under 30 as we do who are over 60. That really is a fairly unusual feature of the Dallas CASA volunteer ranks, and one I think we as a community can be spectacularly proud of, that we have individuals who are early in their careers, early in their own building of their own families, who recognize the needs and the impact they can have. We have a volunteer survey we do every year, and one of my favorite comments that came back was a volunteer who said, "I realized I was born to do this." And I just think, wow, what a privilege we have to make a difference in the life of a child. We're also offering our volunteer training online using a blended platform of online learning supplemented by 2 one-hour long Zoom instruction sessions in each of the 4 weeks. We normally have 30 hours of in-person training, so to be completely online and virtual is extraordinary. So there's just no better time to check out the opportunity to become a CASA volunteer. If you know someone who might be called to do this work, please help us spread the word that our children need us now more than ever. Please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is KLaValle, KLAVALLE at Dallas CASA, DALLASCASA.org. I'd be happy to field any questions you might have. And thank you again for so much of your time today. Take care.
That was a great program, Kathleen. Thank you very, very much. You listen to that and you really begin to appreciate what all that you do. And I think Susan's also done some volunteering into this. So that very interesting. I think it's a service that others could get involved in and participate. So we appreciate the program. Thank you. Okay, let's see. What do we got coming up here? Next week, our speaker is going to be Dr. Robert Hunt, and he is from SMU. So this is going to be an interesting program. So join us again next week. As always, thank you very much, each and every one of you. Thank you for your support. Hope you've enjoyed our program today. And now it's that time for our 4-way test of the things we think, say, and do. And first, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And finally, will it be fun? And I hope you're having fun. I know we're all going stir crazy. You know, hopefully as we kind of start coming out a little bit, we can enjoy some outdoors if we ever get, because we got flooded this weekend. So have a great day. Thank you and all the best. Thank you. Bye-bye.